Hello everyone and welcome back to another Dark Souls 3 weapon showcase. Today we are using the Warpick, and its R1s are horizontal slashes, its R2s are overhead chops, and its running R1 is going to be an overhead chop. While two-handed, its R1s are angled, mostly horizontal slashes, its R2s again are going to be overhead chops, and its skill is going to be galvanized, which increases your stamina regeneration. So this weapon has always been a favorite of mine. I enjoyed it a lot in Dark Souls 1, and for a while I was a little bit disappointed with this weapon's damage output this time around. However, it's all in the timing. All I've got to say on that. It's a fantastic weapon. You can get some decent combos with it. That's not really its primary thing, though. The primary thing with this weapon is, of course, landing extremely damaging counter hits. And that said, it does work extremely well with the Leo ring, so I'd recommend that. Now, getting started with the basics of this weapon. The Warpick requires 12 strength and 10 dexterity in order to wield. At plus 10, it does have a physical base damage of 226, a C scaling in strength, and a D scaling in dexterity. So it is a quality weapon. It doesn't have the greatest scaling when it's uninfused. However, when you do infuse it, you actually get a B scaling in strength and a B scaling in dexterity. Your base damage does drop down a tad, but that extra scaling, it makes up for it so much. So, needless to say, the refined infusion is very well worthwhile with this weapon in particular. So, with this weapon, the biggest pro, of course, is the ability for it to deal massive counter damage. I mean, 971 damage, guys. Yes, it was a charged R2 attack, and that is very difficult to land. Don't get me wrong, it's extremely difficult to land. That was, in fact, the one and only time that I've fully, made contact with it as a counter. That said, I don't always have the best timing, and I'm still learning the game, as are most of us. So, needless to say, once we all get a little more familiar, I'm sure that we will be able to do that on a more regular basis, and I know that's something I personally will be working towards. So, aside from its ability to hit stupid high counter damage, the rest of the moveset, it leaves a bit to be desired. It's nothing terribly special, and with Dark Souls 1's Warpick, you had the benefit of poise. You were able to actually just have a guaranteed way to tank a hit. With this, not so much. It's a little bit more difficult to actually manage hyper armor and reliably know when you can take that hit for the trade. A lot of times you will not be able to successfully judge it, and that can be a cause for frustration. That said, even if you don't land the counters, you can still get some decent damage out. But really, the primary source of damage is on counter hits, so it does make it a little bit difficult to use at times. That said, R1 into jump attack is a good combo, same as any other weapon, so it works out well enough. So really, the pros of the weapon are pretty limited. There's just not a whole lot to them. It's a straightforward weapon. It does deal thrusting damage despite the animation, and that is just due to the weapon's shape and everything. That's just the way it's always been. It's just a thrusting hammer class weapon. Nothing special with it. That said, cons of the weapon, it's got a fair few this time around. Way more than it did the last time. So, getting started with the cons of this one. Again, it's hyper armor. It's not fantastic. If this weapon had hyper armor more similar to a heavier weapon, then that would be fantastic. Even if it had more weight. Because it's actually a very light weapon. It only weighs 4.5 units. So that's, not much at all. It's pretty much on par with most straight swords, actually. That said, damage output is going to be a bit lower because you don't have the inherent damage that they do. You don't have the spam ability that they do. You have to rely on counters. That's not a bad thing. But that does mean it's a lot more difficult to use. So, you gotta watch out for that. Other cons of the weapon, because you really can't rely on tanking through hits, you have to play a little bit more defensively with it. I don't like to play defensively. I like to get up in people's faces personally and just sort of bash them in the face with my Warpick. Something I've always enjoyed doing ever since Dark Souls 1. Didn't really get that in Dark Souls 2, so I was hoping it would be back this time. not so much. I do like the improvement to the moveset as far as the lack of a whiff animation. That is a very good thing. However, I still feel like it would be better if it had that and had more hyper armor or something along those lines. Just because, you know, it's difficult to use at times. You don't have what it needs to be successful for the majority of the way fights go. And that's simply due to the fact that other weapons outclass it. They outclass it a lot. Speed, hyper armor, damage. The primary things that a weapon can have. Aside from the moveset, which is just a standard hammer class moveset, so it's nothing terribly unique. Overall, it's in a way a little bit more mediocre than it was previously in other Souls games. And that said, it's not a bad weapon. It's not a bad weapon, you can still do some good work with it. It's just harder to do. So, it is what it is. Either way, I like it still. I like the fact that it does require a bit more skill than other weapons, and it requires a bit more timing and patience. So, you know, for the cons, it's mostly pretty much all negative aside from the damage output on counters. Slow speed, not the greatest damage. Base, pretty decent, don't get me wrong, but not the greatest. Hyper armor is pretty bad as well. It is what it is. Gotta take it for what it's worth, roll with the punches, and hope that you have some good hyper armor and can get combos like this down on people more often. Because, you know, that wasn't a bad little combo I got on that guy. Like I said, provided you have good timing, you can do some good work. If it did a little more damage to someone's hyper armor, that'd be fantastic. If it did a little bit, or rather, if it had a little bit more hyper armor itself, that would be even better. Can't have everything. Maybe in a patch it'll get a buff of some kind. Maybe the rumors that poise are turned off, and it's not intentional despite what Namco says. Maybe that ends up panning out and they turn poise on so it's Dark Souls 1 style. Who knows? Anything can happen, it's still early. So we just gotta wait and see what happens. Maybe it'll become a god tier weapon. Maybe not. Either way, I still think it's a fun weapon to mess around with. I still enjoy using it. If it's something that you haven't messed around with and you're looking for something that's a bit more of a challenge, try this one out. You might find yourself having a new favorite. But anyway, guys, this is all I've got to say. We're on the last fight. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, found it helpful in one way or another. Please like, subscribe, and all of that good stuff, and I will see you guys all next time.